All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome back to another Future Focused, where we are living at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience with the stated goal of keeping you 10 steps ahead. And we will see how well we do that today. I'm looking forward to today's topic. For those who follow this for a while, you know it's rare I have two guests at once. So this is going to be a fun and dynamic conversation. And for all my L&D friends who've been in the industry, there are two names that will be very familiar to you. So before we get started, if you are not subscribed to the Substack and you missed this conversation, be sure to sign up. You get the Cliff Notes version of everything. I encourage you to do that. But without further ado, we are going to be digging into the topic of kaleidoscope careers is the technical term for it. And if you're going, kaleidoscope career, what's a kaleidoscope career? We're not talking about that cool device that you used to look through and spin around, even though I could spend hours looking at that. We're actually talking about what it means to mobilize talent in an organization in a non-traditional way, and not always to think that the only way to grow is up. And it's easy to say that. It's another thing to actually bring that to life. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So to navigate that, who better to have that conversation with me than Becky Willis and Bev Kaye? Thank you both so much for joining me. I am energized and looking forward to this one.
Woohoo.
Woohoo. Yeah. There we go. You know what? Just for effect, I will do this for you. Here we go. Boom. Oh, it's not doing it. Darn it. Hang on. There it is. There's the confetti celebrating the conversation.
I win.
I know you did, Bev. You did. Yes. It's like one of the Wheel of Fortune or something like that. All right. So for those, I am familiar with both of you. Becky, we've known each other for a long time. Bev, I've known you since my time here in the Midwest through the Executive Learning Exchange and all that good stuff. But others may not be as familiar. So let's do round robin. Becky, since you're up top with me right now, I said I might shake things up. So we'll see if positions change here. But Becky, we'll start with you and then Bev will shift to you.
Great. Cool. Thanks, Christopher. I'm just so excited to be a part of this. I've been listening to all of these for years and following and everything. So this is exciting. I've got a pretty diverse L&D background, but the large piece of it was at HP and HPE, Hewlett Packard, of course. I bleed blue. You can still see that there. And learning strategy, executive development, all sorts of fun things, instructional design, facilitator. But my focus since leaving at the end of my HP career and since leaving HP has been more on modern digital learning. I was the VP of engagement at EdCast. And since then, I have been working with Tractus Learning, where we focus on small and medium business for technology and digital learning. I love everything about digital learning. But I
geeked out on the tech for some time.
I did indeed.
That's been our mutual point of connection.
Yes. And I talk a lot about engagement. I just was at ATD ICE and did a little spiel on engagement at a talk, and that went really well. That was fun.
Okay.
So, and I'm in the process of writing a book on that. So
well, there you go. So you're busy, is what you're saying.
I'm a busy girl. Yeah.
Busy girl. Love it.
But I am, I think primarily I'm a fangirl of Bev. I got to know Bev and all of her stuff. We brought her in at HP, brought in her Career Systems International to help us with executive development at HP. And ever since then, I've been a fangirl. That's all there is to it. You know,
so you get to hang out with me on a live stream with Bev Kaye, the legend. Bev.
The legend.
Which, transitioning over, Bev, you know what? For this one, I'm moving you up top so that you get to sit up here, and we're going to do your introduction because you are a legend in the industry. So you want to do your little intro?
Oh, sure. So the only way you get to be a legend is you have to be old. And
that is not true.
I celebrated a few months ago my 80th birthday.
Wow.
And now your line is, oh my gosh, Bev, you don't look it.
I was just going to say, I would have put you at 32 at tops.
So I really have been doing this for a long time.
Okay.
And I'll just say it all started in my first career. I was a college dean in schools I never could have gotten into.
Really?
I was at Brandeis University and Pomona College.
Okay.
And then I had a chance to go back for my doctorate.
Okay.
And to UCLA.
Did they let you in?
They let me in. Yes.
Okay, there you go. Perfect.
And my dissertation was on career development in organizations. And
Okay.
that was in the mid 70s, and nobody was doing it.
Really?
So little did I know I was creating my future.
Okay.
And I failed my doctoral orals 3 times
What?
because my committee wanted me to do phenomenological research, which
Okay.
means you study a phenomenon. And
Okay.
when you get all the data, you create a theory about the phenomenon you witnessed.
Okay.
And I'm a Jersey girl. We don't create theories. We get things done really fast. So every time I came in and said, "This is it," they would say, "That can't be. Go do more research." But eventually I passed, and right after that, Prentice Hall said, "I think you have a book here." So
Okay.
my first version of Up Is Not the Only Way came out in 1982.
Okay.
And for all your L&D audience, it was a systems approach to career development.
Okay.
There was only one little chapter on mobility,
Okay.
but the title, Up Is Not the Only Way, caught.
Oh, I can see why that would
Right.
catch, especially because I think even now that can be a bit contrarian, but I can
Mhm.
only imagine in the
Back then.
80s that being even more like,
Right.
what did you just say? I
Right,
mean, that would
right.
be borderline offensive.
And now it's in vogue. Up is not, just like we said before this, for you, up is not the only way.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. I recently told my husband, on my gravestone, I wanted to say, "Now, Beverly, up is the only way."
I love that.
So he promised he would do that.
Well, if you need help with that, my parents are funeral directors. We know a guy who's in the monument business. We can
I
get
love
whatever
it.
you want put on that
I
stone,
love
Bev.
it. I love it. So I built a consulting company over time, over the next 30 years, 30, 40 years, that specialized first in career development. How can managers and employees talk to each other about career choices?
Yeah.
How do you prep the manager? How do you prep the employee? And so built a training all around that, learning modules, etc. And then when McKinsey published The War for Talent, and they
Okay.
said people don't leave organizations, they leave managers.
Yep.
Everyone said yes, 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 but no one was telling managers how. So I am a how-to kind of girl. I think
As proven by your doctoral stuff, rather
that's
than
right. That's
yeah,
right.
well, it's great to
Right.
tell managers, hey, guess what? Everybody's leaving because of you, but we got to give them something.
Yeah, managers, here's what you should do. Right. So that's kind of my playing ground. And I've done it for a good 50-ish years,
That's
and I'm
awesome.
still turned on and tuned in
That is
to
so awesome.
learning both the retention engagement side and the career side. And now I'm turning everything into licenses and products, and
Okay.
so that's where I am.
Well, and what I think is really interesting, and this is what I love about having conversations with people from just all sides of the map, is the fact that there's a lot of this stuff that we talk about, and it's presented as like new, hey, this whole career development or career mobility, it's the new thing. And it's like nothing is new under the sun, but it comes in different flavors,
Right.
and it looks slightly different. Even like we talked about just a minute ago, in the 80s, saying up isn't the only way would have been far more controversial than saying it now. But the challenges that you have to face to actually execute that probably are similar.
Right. Spoken like an L&D person of the heart. You're right.
or like a leader, I think, too.
No,
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Go for it, Becky.
To me, Christopher, I think the concepts stay the same. She talked about, put down your telescope, which is looking up, and pick up your kaleidoscope, which gives you this variety of choices. Bev invented the concept, although she did not trademark it, or else I think we'd all be going out to dinner in Tahiti or something. the concept of a stay interview. I mean, what the heck, a stay interview rather than, oh, you're leaving. Let me find out why you left.
Right.
And my favorite thing that she does, and she did this at ATD, is she asks people, when was the last time you said, I love my job? So those are concepts that she's built into her whole IP. And what we've done is we've talked about the reality of today, and all of the challenges that we have today, in the manager's role. Oh my gosh. I mean, we could talk this whole time about, how tough it is for managers today. And the fact that there aren't as many up opportunities, they just don't exist. But there's lots of other ideas and things that you can do.
Well, and I think that's where, as we dig into some of these things, there's the one, how do you execute it? But some of it is just acknowledging that challenge. And I'm curious, Bev, from your perspective on this, some of these things that we talk about, like having a stay interview, I know even in my experience, for a lot of people, that's a monumental idea. But sometimes it's this really simple stuff of, have you ever just asked somebody, what would make you want to stay here, and engage with a person on that? And it seems monumental, but at the same time, it's actually so simple, yet so many people get a lot of anxiety around this. And I'm curious what especially over time, have you seen changes in the challenges? Like, have people changed in the way they respond to this? Because a lot of this stuff isn't new and it's not novel, but it is like, man, you, like you said, 50 years into it, and people are still going, whoa, you mean I should ask people
right?
What's going to keep them here? I never thought to do that.
The manager says, what?
Yeah.
And I've always wanted, in the learning end of what we do, to have any manager in any audience say, that's not so hard. I could do that.
I could do that.
And that's the secret, especially for technical leaders.
Yeah.
They're not, they're not trained as learning leaders are. And what comes easy to us does not come easy to them.
You know what? That's a super fair point. And I know, that is a large part of a lot of the conversations I have, is when you've been around it a long time, you forget that that's not in the ethos of most people managers development. They've never experienced that. The number of leaders I've talked to over the years where I went, have you ever had somebody who was like a phenomenal leader that actually took the time to like tell you what they did? Like, you didn't just observe it and try and pick it up, but like actually work with you. I'm always surprised how many are like, no, I just got thrown into this manager role and kind of told, you're really good at what you do, so lead a team of people to do it. And I think we can forget, a lot of people don't have those foundational skills, and that's not a knock on them. It's just the reality of how the system works.
Right.
Yep. And then sometimes they find, wow, I don't like doing this, and they want to go back. and that's not so easy. That's one of the up is not the only way directions is, let me go back. No.
So I want to talk about that one, because this is one where, backstage we were saying, I was sharing an experience I had, Becky, you shared one you had, where the organization actually embraced this. And it's one thing to say as a company, career doesn't have to be up, but there's a lot of culture and systems and even psychology in place where people say, no, you don't have to move up to succeed here. wink, wink, like, and there's a lot of subtleties to it. And I'm curious, as you look at that, there's this skill component, but there is also this cultural tide that makes it very difficult to tackle some of these. And I'm curious, as you think about this, what are some of those challenges that people have to face? Because you can't just say, hey, we're going to do this, and magically it starts happening.
Right. So I heard there's two things I want to react to. One is it's not just a skill match. And
Yes.
now the learning world is filled with skill.
Right. If we just become a skills-based organization, everything will solve itself.
And what were we before if we weren't skill-based?
Yeah, I know.
So I agree with you that almost everything is out there already. If you blow off the dust,
yep,
clean it up, there's your theory. I mean, so there is nothing new under the sun except maybe AI. And
yes.
I don't want to even go there. But to answer your question, I think job fit is a combination of skills. Do I have the ability to do this? Interests. Is it something that gets me up in the morning? And values. Do I value what this company does and what I'm doing, etc.? So fit is skills, interests, and values. And if you take off the other two and only have a skill fit, that's where you're going to find mobility problems.
Big time.
That's where you're going to find the engineer who says, yes, I want to be a manager, gets there and says, ew, not only am I bad at this, but I don't even like it.
Yeah.
And what they do is they jump ship instead of saying to their own manager or to somebody, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I may not want to go back to exactly what I did, but I miss my technical, using that part of my brain.
Yeah.
And in career mobility terms, we call it realignment.
Okay.
So I'm readjusting, I'm realigning, and companies that support that will keep their technical people longer.
Okay.
And most don't have a way of doing it.
No, and it's a complex problem because, to your point, it's one thing if somebody has the skills and maybe they could be a manager and they get into it and they go, I can do it. But that's a really hard thing to acknowledge. And I remember the organization where we got this right. It was a huge deal the first time somebody raised their hand and said, I've been in a manager role for 5 years and I don't want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I don't know where else to go because I don't want to go backwards in my career. I know I have the skills and the capabilities to contribute to this organization, but it's almost, if people don't know how to even raise their hand and say that without being looked at as a failure, like,
Right.
oh, you stepped into this and you failed, so I guess you're no longer, and that fear and giving people space to say, you know what, it's okay. That's not the only way. And you're not somehow less than just because management isn't the path for you.
Right.
It's fun to think about my career and has been this sort of up and down and around and upside down. All sorts of things. When we first started working on this with Bev, one of our instructional designers and I got together and I said, I haven't really thought about it, but mapping my own career is full of changes. And Bev has these lovely phrases like sideways to the highways.
Okay.
So I moved, for example, from, I started out in learning and I went into technical and I went into support and then I went into marketing because it looked like fun. And I got up to manager level of marketing and could not for the life of me get to director.
Okay.
Because everybody said you'd never carried the bag and been a salesperson. So I took a step back and became an individual contributor again and became a salesperson. And my next step was director and VP level after that, moving up to that. But I took that step back. So and I also have dropped out of enterprise companies to go be a consultant or to work at an entrepreneurial company. So my map looks like something in a kaleidoscope.
Yeah.
And I think it's really fun to ask leaders and other folks, like, what did you do to get to where you are? That broad base of scope, your own story, Christopher, of, being technical and moving into different places. It's like when you made that decision, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going back to that. I'm losing money. I'm doing, everybody's going to think I was a failure, all those things you said.
Yeah.
But it ended up being the best thing to happen. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's sometimes playing the long game. And I think, one of the things with what you shared with me, the way you're breaking this down is I like the fact that you're approaching the 3 different audiences that you really have to tackle, because it is a multifaceted problem. You've got the employee who they've got their own journey they've got to be on too, like you just described, Becky. They need to understand how to think about the plays they're making and the why and how it fits together. And they need to understand that. You got the manager that, I've been that person where I've got the playbook, but my boss doesn't.
Mhm.
And so they don't really even know what to do with you, because they're like, I don't know how to do this. And then you've got the organization as a whole, the HR organization, where, there's a lot of HR organizations that aren't structured in a way to actually even support this. How do we mobilize people in different ways? So I'm curious, as you think about those 3 audiences between the 2 of you, like, what are some of the standout challenges or opportunities that you see in each of those groups? The employee, the manager.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you named those 3, because one thing that came out of the early research was that I've used ever since is a 3S model. 3 players to make a development culture work. The individual has to be the spark. The individual has to knock on the door of whoever and say, I'm not happy doing this. Here's what I love, that project last year, whatever, the spark. The manager is the support, not the answer machine.
Yeah.
So managers fear the career conversation because I don't have the answers.
Exactly. And I know lots of managers who panic and just avoid the whole thing because they think if I have this conversation, I've got to solve it for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So we scream, no, you don't have to solve it. We have to say that your answers, you do not have to give the answer, but what's not negotiable is you come in with great questions.
Okay.
Great questions. And that's what we try to do. And then the third player is the system.
Yep.
And that's where the glue has to happen, the rewards, etc., to tie it all together. And, in the early days when I was doing more systems consulting, I would say to a client, if you had 100 energy points, and everybody should think in your organization, to spread between, we aim at the employee, we aim at the manager, but we aim at all the systems we're building. How would you divide those 100 points? And then I know the size of the job that has to be done. Because one system is usually dominant and the other 2 fall into the background and they can't. So 3 S's: support and a spark and systems.
So breaking down the 3, I'm curious what you see, working with organizations across the board on this, because as I look at my experience and some of just the conversations I've had, I see opportunities a lot of times in organizations in all 3, but it's dynamic in that there's bigger opportunities in certain areas than others. Do you see, honestly, I feel like it's a pretty even split across the board, but I'm curious, as you look at it, is there one that tends to be a bigger opportunity for organizations as a general rule, or do you find that it's like, usually there's room to grow in all 3?
I think there is. There is.
I think today, given the tools, one of the reasons why this is, sort of cropped up again, I think, is that today we have some tools that make some things easier. We have, digital learning platforms that can do all sorts of things. We can do skills assessments. We have talent marketplaces. We have, some different tools in HRIS that make things a little bit simpler. So some of the tools make it so that it's easier systems wise to implement once you teach HR and the company what's involved. It's still all three. I think the easiest one to solve, if you will, is the employee one. We have a simple course that is interactive for the employee to learn how to figure out their skills, interests, and values. Those are fundamental things. And they go through that. They create a workbook and they create something that they can have a conversation with their manager or someone else if their manager is not receptive. We know lots of managers are not receptive to this.
Well, and I can see that being a relatively, not an easier nut to crack, but I can see that being one where, especially I feel like in the digital age, employees are more informed on opportunities and what's available, things they can do, what they don't. I think figuring out how that works within the system and also expanding people's horizons. Because I think going back to even the topic of your book, sometimes people can have this very like, well, I'm in marketing, so I guess moving up in marketing is my path, and going, well, maybe not, and expanding the horizons to go, if you really are skilled here, have values and purpose in this, you actually might be able to do this. So I can see, expanding horizon, which is a challenge in and of itself, but it's not as tough of a nut to crack, or at least to get people started on it versus some of the systems and the managers. I'm curious your take on that, because those are some big leviathans sometimes.
The manager one is one that is, having done leadership development, having been involved in managers, and Bev having written Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, which is a Manager 101 book, which every time that one of my friends or someone or children of my friends at this point in my life take on their first manager job, I always recommend it. I think I can't even tell you the number of copies of that book that I've bought. And there's Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go is, a good foundational book for this. But how do they have that conversation? So their employee has figured out and done this workbook and figured out their skills, interests, and values, and figured out that, they really don't like spreadsheets. They're not a number person, but a really big part of their job is doing a spreadsheet. So it's kind of a shame that you don't like doing spreadsheets. But how do you have the conversation with, this is your job and this is where you're going and this is what you want to do? What are the questions, as Bev said, that you ask? So we have a lot of resources in the manager pieces about, here's some questions you can ask for a stay interview. Here's some questions you can ask about, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Kind of things. And learning how to do active listening. So the manager piece is growing in resources and abilities to help the manager to achieve what they need to achieve.
Okay.
As I was listening to both of you, I think the key word is opportunity.
Yeah.
How do we help individuals see more opportunity? And in one of the books, I talk about being opportunity minded or opportunity blinded. I am opportunity minded to a fault. Okay. So whoever is my airplane mate, I got to either fix them up with somebody or give them some key tips.
Yeah.
And I think if you have an opportunity-minded attitude inside of an organization, when there's a shift, instead of being an opportunity whiner, no, we changed, you become an opportunity miner. Now that so-and-so is in charge, what can I do? So I love words I love to find new words, and I love words that rhyme, and I love words that stick in a person's mind.
Okay.
And boy, over the years, I see so many opportunity blinded people
Yep.
walking
I would
through
agree.
an organization saying, there's nothing for me.
Well, and you know what's interesting about that is I think as a manager, you have a really unique opportunity because you have a different visibility and lens into things where, I mean, I know when I work with my teams, like there's things I know that are going on in other parts of the organization that I see that, again, I've got to have a mindset shift where I'm not a talent hoarder, where I'm afraid that if my people go work on something, they're somehow going to abandon me and, you know, leave me hanging, and go, you know what, operate out of an abundance mindset that it's like, hey, there is more than enough to go around. But you actually, as a manager, have a really unique opportunity to say, you know what, you're really good at this. I know this is a challenge that's happening over here. Like, let me connect some dots. And I think, you know, as much as you joked about being that airplane mate that's always trying to do the connecting tissue, I see in many ways managers have a really unique opportunity to play that same role, because you know what your people do and what they're good at and what they like, or you should, if you're spending time getting to know them. You have that unique opportunity to go, you know what, I saw this over here. It may not be a formal job opportunity, but is this something you'd be interested in? Is this something you'd like to explore that I can help facilitate that connection? Going back to, as a manager, do you have to have all the answers? No. But if you're proactively already always seeking out, like, hey, where might there be other things that can happen? You can actually be that connective tissue that can make or break the cohesiveness of your team.
Right. So Becky, if we print those words exactly as he said them, it'll help the explore part of the model that we're trying to deliver. And I know you're getting ready to pounce on the word explore.
So, Christopher, we have in Bev's book, Up's Not the Only Way, there are 6 directions.
Okay.
What we focused on to start out with is what she calls grow here. So that's enrichment and exploration. Okay. How do I enrich my current job by doing other things or by coming up with other ideas? And we have some ideas in that individual course on how they can do that. We have this cool dude in the course, Antonio, and Antonio feels that he's stuck in his current job. And what we do is we walk through the workbook with him, and we walk through the discussion with him on how enrichment and exploration can help him to think about different things. He looks at his, you know, different people in the team are doing this, other people in the team are doing that. And, you know, those things are really interesting to me. How come I'm not doing it? And change his mindset to, you know, what can you do? How can you own your career to think enrichment and exploration in your current job? And of course, it has a happy ending. I'm going to spoil the whole thing and say,
spoiler alert.
Yeah. The other 4 directions are lateral moves, where you move across the organization. Up is still possible.
Yeah, it's still a possibility. We're not taking it off the table. We're just saying it's not the only path.
But how do you prepare to go up? How do you prepare, you know, to move up in the organization? And for, you know, going back to my own example of, I was in marketing, to prepare to move up, I had to go into sales. And actually understand where, as a sales leader, what was marketing going to do for me that was going to make my job actually work. So Antonio's story has some interesting concepts of what he needs to learn before he really can move up, even though he thought at the beginning he could.
Okay.
And, you know, just to tag on that, I think when managers and employees talk about that coveted vertical move, we never talk about the downside of an up move.
I want you to go into that, but I can just say firsthand, the number of people over the years that have come to me and been like, you know, how do I get to your position or whatever? Yeah. And I've sat down and said, there's what the appearance of the position is, but let's talk about the actual challenges, the political stuff I deal with, the back and forth, the targets that are often on your back in a senior role, the burden of carrying, a lot of the hardships and stuff that come. And a lot of times when I'm actually very vulnerable and transparent about the loneliness that often comes in senior level positions, because you're like, you can't talk to anybody and nobody can really relate to you. And it's very isolating. And when I actually share some of that, I honestly find a lot of people go, if somebody had had that conversation with me years ago, I might have thought differently about my career aspirations, because I don't even know that that's actually what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the conversation that's just not happening enough.
It's not.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
no.
And the other, we talked a little bit in the green room as well about, so I got to this position and, gosh, I inherited this team and half of them don't like their job.
Right. Yeah. I had to reorg the group, and like everybody hated it and it didn't work the first time. And I mean, there's a lot of that stuff that we often put the veneer on the outside of some of these positions. Like, oh, you get here and you arrive, and it's like, no, it's a different set of challenges. And it's a set of challenges that some people, if they actually knew that's what they were facing, would go, like, yeah, maybe it pays a little more, but not worth it in the end, type of a thing.
Right.
Yeah. So the fifth direction is realignment. So, okay. So now I'm a manager. I've done it, as you said, for 5 years, and this is not for me. Or something in my life has changed. I need to take care of my ill mother who's moved in with me, or something else has changed in my life where I decide that I don't want to be whatever position I am, lofty position anymore, and I need to realign and move back. So we talk about, how do you do that? How do you do that gracefully? How do you do that without looking like a fool? How do you do that without looking like a failure? And how do you position that as a manager? We were talking again in the green room a little bit about this program that we had at HP that I was so excited about. I was very involved in it. It was called the Technical Career Path, or because it was HP, everything had to be an acronym, so it was TCP.
There's always got to be an acronym for it.
Got to be an acronym, yeah. And TCP was for the 75,000 technologists that we had. And a lot of them wanted to just be technologists. They wanted to just continue to geek out and do their thing and have patents and do all that kind of stuff. So we had dual career paths. You could move up and be a vice president, or you could move up and be a senior fellow.
Yep.
And we only had like 12 of those, but there was a path.
There was another pathway.
Yeah, and it was a very honored pathway, as you can imagine. And lots of companies have positions that, you really acknowledge that technical knowledge, whatever that technical knowledge would be, is very important. So having a program that acknowledges that and sets that up and communicates and rewards and recognizes it helps with realignment as well.
What I like about the realignment one is, I think we saw the impact of organizations not being prepared for that realignment one when COVID hit. And we saw the great reassessment as everybody started kind of going, is what I'm doing now the most important thing in my life anymore? And because companies didn't really have a way for people to say, you know what, my priorities have shifted, or I want to do this, because that wasn't leaned into and said, you know what, we've made space for that. We've created an ecosystem where we can work with that. This is where we saw like the great exodus of people going, well, I guess I'm realigning. So the company's not for me. So I'm just going to go off. And that's where we saw these massive exoduses, which costed companies, I've been around my kids too long, cost companies millions of dollars, billions potentially in lost talent of people who they didn't really want to quit.
Right.
Yeah.
They just went, I got into this position because at the time it was really important to me. And now I'm realizing this isn't really my biggest priority. And I would be satisfied and actually happy and engaged in a different capacity. But I just don't believe the organization is supportive of that. And so I'd rather just go away, which again, a manager has an opportunity, if they're listening and engaged, to know that's happening and go, hey, like, let's talk about that. I maybe don't have the answers, but we can have that conversation.
But the organization has to be really tied into that as
They
well.
do.
The organization needs to be able to communicate, lateral, vertical realignment, and our last one is relocation. They need to communicate, they recognize and reward managers, communicate when someone moves laterally, that's a big announcement. That's
You have to
exciting.
celebrate it.
Yeah, celebrate these things, and set up the right communication for that. We're having some fun right now with some of our customers of talking about how do you communicate that? How do you get that executive sponsor involved in that so that the message, when you do your coffee talks, when you do all that, you talk about celebrations, you talk about tiger teams, those types of things where you can get involved. You have maybe a talent marketplace tool that you've done in yourself, or you've, bought one of the ones that are available, but you have to communicate that it's okay to do this. It's not only okay, it's cool.
Well, and that's just it. And hopefully this conversation can help make some of this stuff cool, because to your point, the communication and the change around that, often what we don't say says far more than what we do say.
Right.
And I think sometimes there's that tendency to just, well, we're just not going to say anything. And then that's interpreted by everyone as,
Right.
oh, well, it must have been a demotion. It must have been, a negative because it wasn't celebrated, when really it might not have been. But if you're not out there proactively sending the message that this is awesome, this person we've realigned, we value them as an employee. They have changed their priorities, and we celebrate that. And we want everyone to know that. I mean, I think back to the organization I was with when we shifted our whole strategy around leadership to be not only one directional. We celebrated the snot out of people who said, I don't want to be a manager anymore. I hated it. I didn't like it. And I wasn't very good at it. You know what? Good for you. Like, let's talk about that. And if you're somebody who's struggling with the same thing, guess what? It's okay to raise your hand and look at the success story of this person and how much they're enjoying their job now that they've moved, instead of, oh yeah, Bill, we demoted him to whatever.
Right.
But another cool part of this is the role of subject matter experts nowadays in collaborative learning. We're beginning, we've always dealt with subject matter experts in learning, and we've always, sort of treasured them and liked them and disliked them all at the same time. But, collaborative learning, social learning, the ability of having that person in the corner who can answer the questions, and celebrating them and rewarding them so that they don't top out in their position.
Well, Bev, I want to transition to you because I saw you were about to say something. But before I do, Becky, on that point, I think with two trends happening right now, that becomes even more important, which one, as AI is continuing to advance, the need for people who have deep technical expertise and have the capacity to stay there and provide that oversight is huge. Secondly, if you look at the population numbers and people having less kids, we're in this crisis of what do they call it? The gray tsunami, where like a lot of our seasoned legacy people are leaving the organization. And sometimes it's just because they're burned out. And going back to that realignment, if it's hey, we can transition you into a role that is no longer the same thing that it was before, but we want to value the expertise and capability that you have just in a different capacity. That's huge when you're dealing with the fact that you don't have an insurgence of new talent because there's just not enough people to fill the roles.
Right. And
So, Bev,
right there is an opportunity for a great stay interview.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose you. I can see that you're looking around and wondering if this is right. I want to understand what's most important so I can do what I can to keep you, if not in my unit, in this organization.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough managers say that. And then I wanted to, in my desire to make everything easier for any leader listening, and you have to go into a career conversation about the options, think of it as giving people career leverage in their career. And it stands for lateral, enrichment, vertical, exploratory, and the first R is realignment, and we've talked about that. And the second R is relocation. Sometimes it is right for the person to go.
Yep.
But nowadays, what I'm seeing that I think is wonderful, in the old days, once you left, the back door was locked tight.
Yep.
Now we are seeing the boomerang happen over and over. So I want managers, and we talk about this, to have elegant exits that create the possibility for a respectful return.
Yeah.
So if I say to you, I hate to lose you, Chris. I know you're going to X. I hope it works. If it doesn't, give me a call, or give me a call anyway. I'd love to know how you're doing.
You know,
That's more elegant, right?
What's so funny about that example, because I think sometimes managers are like, but that doesn't work. And I remember I had a high performing employee once, and we had these regular conversations, and he had a desire to go work in big tech. He wanted to go work for the big tech. And I knew that. And I said, I don't know that it's going to be quite what you think, but I think you need to experience that. And so let's work together on that. And I will tell you, this was early in my management days. It was one of the most terrifying conversations I ever had to have, to be like, I'm literally talking to one of my top performing employees about developing a plan for them to leave. But it was the smartest thing I did, because that employee ended up crushing it through their transition, preparing for their backfill. Like it was a phenomenal transition.
Right.
We celebrated the departure, and a year later, he called and said, "You were right. It wasn't what I expected. Is there any chance we can figure out a way for me to come back and work together?" And it's one of those, like, it's so counterintuitive, but the power of it is incredible when you see it in action.
Right. And those are the kinds of stories that are in Up Is Not the Only Way, and in the idea of this kaleidoscope. And you made a statement when you were asking us about the word kaleidoscope. And you said, I love kaleidoscopes. I could spend hours looking through it. And it was such a great quote. And it's true. How can we help people see the current job as maybe a twist, just like that? And then their passion is refueled.
Yeah.
We always think, leave for something else. And the message that Becky and I, and why we both love, and she just gave me this little teeny kaleidoscope that I carry with me, is that let's look at it differently.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the key entree to a kaleidoscope conversation. Hey, let's both look at this differently.
Yeah. Well,
and now that I know you love this, how can we expand this in your current work?
Well, and what's funny is, as managers, and I think this is sometimes where for managers who are listening, where you might feel limited by the organizational system or whatever it is that feels like a limiting factor. You actually have a lot more power and autonomy over the dynamics of your team and the things like that. And if you take the time to get to know your teams, I mean, I know from personal experience, there have been lots of times where even within our own team, to your point of the kaleidoscope example, you've been able to say, you have this one person on the team that really thrives and loves this part, and this other person over here really thrives and loves this part. What if we work to figure out how we change the way the team operates to really optimize what you do? And you actually, like, again, I found experiences over the years where you don't even necessarily change somebody's job. It's just about shifting the work that they're working on within their job and balancing that within the team. And you can build really engaged teams without going, I mean, it might mean you move talent around, and it might look like big changes and job role changes. And sometimes, honestly, I think sometimes we build it up in our head to be a lot bigger than it is. I'm amazed the number of times we're just having a deep conversation with an employee and understanding who they are and what matters to them. Sometimes it's the simplest thing where you go, what if we just change this? And you find out that was the kaleidoscope click that completely realigned the kaleidoscope. And all of a sudden they're re-engaged and you go, that was it. All I had to do was this one little thing and you're a new person. And it's like, yep, sometimes that's the case.
We are going to use your words, now as we market this. So that is excellent. And it's true. It's change it a little bit. And, we have some good handouts. And if anyone listening wants, what were those questions you asked? I know that we can provide it on the Kaleidoscope website. We have some, and we're glad to help anybody who says, I want to do that.
Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of people who want to do it. They just struggle to know how. And I think that's where what you've done with my Kaleidoscope careers, I think is great. And we'll put the links in the comments, with this. We'll share those. So if you're listening or watching, you can find them there. But I think one of the things that I think about what we've just been talking about, I read a study recently. There's a lot of people concerned about AI and what it means for their jobs. And what I think is interesting about it was one study I was reading was a lot of managers are concerned that AI will come for their jobs. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about it is when I think about the role of a manager, the tactical stuff that so many managers are actually busy doing, going in and approving expense reports and coordinating schedules and approving time and all of this stuff. Yeah, I think AI is absolutely, and it should come for that. But when I think about the things we just discussed, you can't replace that even with an advanced chatbot, because honestly, the best career conversations I've had with people, they may even have had the answers technically of what they might want to do, but what they actually want is that relationship with someone they trust that knows them, and they can ask the hard questions they're maybe uncomfortable asking. They want the honest feedback on, what am I not thinking about? What are the questions I'm not asking? What are the things you've seen? And that's something that I think will be far better off in the workforce if managers spend more of their time doing that kind of stuff. And I don't think AI is a substitute for that. And what was interesting is in this research study, most of the things they were concerned about AI coming for was this other administrivia, mechanical stuff that they do. And it's like,
nobody likes that stuff.
And you want to say, take it, AI.
Take it.
Regards.
Yes, take it. Yeah.
Right.
LinkedIn's workforce planning report, the one that they do every January, this year had some really fascinating statistics. I've got two of them that just blow me away. Only 33% of orgs have an internal mobility program. And only 1 in 5 employees have a strong confidence in the ability to make an internal move. So they'd rather leave than, feel confident they can make an internal move.
Yep.
And yet 94% of employees would stay at a company longer if it invested in their career.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just from this January. That's powerful,
Well, and I think what's interesting about that is through this whole conversation, so many of the things we talked about, and I think this is why people checking out your resources would be super helpful, is they aren't necessarily all big. Like managers may hear, if they invested in my career and go, well, I don't have budget dollars, I don't have access to these other things. But I can't tell you how many times where just time and attention is seen as an investment. Like when your boss is actually invested in you as a person, that is an investment. So you actually have more power than you realize.
And you can, maybe it's as easy, maybe the sentence, I'm invested in your career.
Yeah.
Because I see what you can produce is a great sentence that I don't think managers ever say.
No.
I'm invested in your success. And they are. Of course they are. But verbalize it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I think that's a good point, because it goes back to something we said before, is what we don't say often speaks volumes compared to what we do say. And so while we may go, well, I'm sure you talk to most managers that go, well, of course I care about the development of my people. Yeah, but have you told them that? Have you actually sat down with them and said, I care about you and your development, and I want to understand it and work with you on what that looks like?
From
have you said
God's ears, right? Let me pull that sentence out and make a banner, right?
Yeah.
And it's, and then you have to help me figure out how to make it work for you, because I'm not a mind reader.
Right.
Yeah.
Etc.
Yeah.
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 Because I think that's a good point, Bev, that it is okay to say as a manager, I need you to help me with that, because I don't know you and I have limited resources, and acknowledging that. And I don't have the resources to just go make things up and hope it works. So I need to work with you on what is it that's important to you.
Skills, interests, values. Yeah, that's where that kind of work is really helpful. I think one of the other concepts in the book that is sort of a, oh gosh, I knew that, is, a quick, in the flow of work, if you will, 10-minute conversation. It's like, gee, Joe, you did a really great job at that. Is this something that you're really interested in?
Right. Exactly. And Becky, a long time ago, I should find it, I wrote an article about how to notice, because I don't think managers notice. So the easiest way to notice is just recognize Becky smiled while she was doing the blah, blah report to the team.
Yeah. It's paying attention.
Liked it. Recognize. Yeah. If you want to go a step further, you verbalize, hey, Becky, when you gave that report, boy, did your posture change and your face changed. It must have been a great experience for you. So it's recognize, verbalize, and the third step, if you can do it, is mobilize.
Yeah.
I have a project coming up that would definitely demand that ability. So, and we're noticing all the time, but we're not doing something with what we notice.
And I love that you said the verbalize and mobilize included in that, because it's easy to see things and make assumptions and not actually confirm. And because there might be times where you go, oh, I saw that, you must love that. And then you go do it and they go, I don't like, now I feel like but you didn't take the time to go, I saw this. Is that like, it seems like it. Would you like to do more of that?
It's like, am I interpreting that correctly? Yeah. It looks like you love blah, blah, right?
It's so funny because, and then we'll wrap it, because we could talk for hours on this, but I was on a podcast recently and somebody asked, they said, you have 7 kids. How do you give attention to them when and it goes back to what you just described. I am always watching their behavior, and I spend time with them as a group, but I'm always watching what they do so that I can tell, like, something's off, daddy needs to lean in, and I need to, and it's not all the time. It's not every day, but I can tell, I get those reads. And then again, it's verbalizing that and saying, hey, you seem a little off today. Is everything okay? Are you doing all right?
Right.
And sometimes even just the act of asking was all they needed.
And
you noticed, you can't, like, no, I'm good. Right. Thank you. And that was it. But I know that I learn a lot from parenting that actually
A great practice
it
for management.
translates really well in the workforce. Or maybe it's the other way around from doing it in leadership. Who knows?
And you know, the act of recognizing and verbalizing, if you stop there, that employee is going to hold on to, he noticed, she noticed.
Yes.
I didn't even notice how much I like that.
Right.
And they'd applaud you. They'd thank you for that. They'd say, I have a good manager.
Yeah.
I never knew that about myself.
Right.
Thank
I
you.
didn't realize I was smiling when I was working away at that, but you did. And the fact you paid enough attention to call that out, let me know you're watching. So
Correct.
I think all of these things just, one, validate how important people are when it comes to work. And I think that can be a kind of pushback to some of this, oh, AI is coming for all of it. No, people care deeply about people. And when we do, it really makes work different. And so I think that's awesome. And I think this is just an encouragement to employees on what they can do, and also to managers that, hey, what you think you might have to do might not be as big of a thing as you think it is. And I love the resources you all have created. We'll share those out. So thank you both for spending an hour with me today. This was a fantastic hour. I could have spent several more with you.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much, Christopher. This has just been cool.
All
Fun
right.
to connect again.
Yes, always fun to connect. So thanks everybody for watching, listening. Hopefully this has challenged you, whether you're an employee or a manager or a leader in an organization trying to figure some of this stuff out for how you do this more broadly. Lots here. So check out the resources, and we will see you on the other side.